VAWA now protects the nebulous concept of gender identity, defined in Title 18 as actual or perceived gender-related characteristics. New gender identity laws allow male people to claim womanhood. The Violence Against Women Act has become the Violence Against Anybody Act. Its original sex-based protections are now meaningless because men with gender identities who commit violence against women are protected by federal law.
Do you think it's a concern that there are people that might be gaming the laws and pretending, I guess, that they're women in order to attack women in, let's say, a domestic violence shelter designed for women?
Of course, and this is already happening. Like I talked about Karen Wood, the male rapist who took advantage of these allowances. We know that predatory men will do anything to gain access to victims. This is a legal disaster because predatory men are already taking advantage of gender identity legislation in order to gain access to women and girls.
I did talk to one of the big organizations in Arizona that I'm involved with that helps domestic violence victims, and they have said there has been a number of instances where they've had to deal with it, where men, I guess, are pretending that they're a woman. I don't know if pretending.
Madam Chair, I would ask for a point of personal privilege. I think the suggestion that transgender individuals are pretending they are of a different gender is deeply offensive.
You mean
and I would
sex?
ask,
Thank you, sir, and maybe that's not the right word. I actually talked to the people with the boots on the ground that have domestic violence shelters, and maybe that's not the right word, and I didn't intend it to be offensive, but people that, males who were identifying as a woman were actually trying to find the women in the domestic violence shelter.
So Lesko had a series of questions that she was asking, and
Right.
Mr. Cicilline had said something about that she used language regarding transgender
Right.
that was offensive. Could you?
Sure, thank you. Acknowledging biological sex is not inhumane. It's actually inhumane to force women to share intimate spaces with male people who call themselves women. So I don't see any problem with calling someone male or female, man or woman, because these are words that refer to biological reality. Gender itself, femininity or masculinity, that's not important. And like I said, we need to acknowledge biological sex. Doing so is not inhumane. People who self-identify as transgender are human. They're people, right? But that doesn't mean that I have to kowtow to their identity. I can still call someone who identifies as a transgender woman a man because he is a man, he's male. Title IX is basically moot now because men can be women.
So just to follow up on that, so if a biological man identified as a woman to run in this track meet, and then they can now qualify for those funds?
Exactly, and that's a problem.
before I begin my questioning, I want to set the record straight with some facts. Whether or not the minority witness believes that transgender people exist, it is a fact they do. And despite her effort to decide the sexual orientation and gender identity of the entire population of our country, that is not her right. In fact, transgender, gender nonconforming, and gender fluid people are disproportionately survivors of violence. They deserve to access services consistent with their needs. And I'd like to offer a few examples of the challenges that transgender Americans face. According to the U.S. Transgender Survey, which surveyed nearly 28,000 transgender adults, almost half of transgender individuals had been sexually assaulted in their lifetime. The Human Rights Campaign found that at least 128 transgender individuals have been killed since 2013.